While I was unconscious in a hospital bed, my in-laws sold my jewelry piece by piece. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I waited. And then I sold the one thing they never thought they could lose. The first thing I noticed when I woke up wasn't the pain, it was the silence. Hospital silence has a texture, thin, stretched, artificial. The kind that hums in your ears when your body is too weak to react. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks like they might anchor me back into myself. My abdomen burned. A deep, pulsing ache that reminded me I had been cut open and stitched back together by strangers who never learned my name. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 days later, when I asked my mother-in-law to bring my jewelry box. ID. Feels safer if it wasn't tea at home, I said softly, my voice still hoarse from anesthesia. Just bring it here, please. She didn't meet my eyes. Oh, she said, brushing invisible lint from her cardigan. That something in her tone made my stomach tighten harder than the stitches ever could. That box, she continued, smiling thinly, was empty. I remember blinking at her, slow and confused, like my brain had slipped on ice. Empty. I repeated. She nodded. We didn't think it mattered. We, the word echoed. My jewelry wasn't just gold and stones. It was my life, compressed into metal. My wedding bangles. My mother's necklace, the one she gave me before she died, warm from her skin. Earrings I bought with my first salary, shaking with pride. A thin ruby ring I wore when I needed to remember who I was. All gone, and I was lying there, stitched, swollen, powerless. When I whispered, she shrugged. Well, you were away like I had gone on vacation, instead of being sliced open on an operating table, because somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice was waking up, and it was counting. Before the surgery, I trusted them. That's the most humiliating part. I trusted my in-laws because my husband asked me to. Because he said, their family, they'd never hurt you. Because after 5 years of marriage, I was tired of being the suspicious one, the cautious one, the woman who hid her valuables and her feelings like they were crimes. So when the doctor said, I'd need surgery and weeks of recovery, I let my in-laws help. They offered so eagerly. We'll take care of the house, my father-in-law said, puffing out his chest like a hero. You focus on healing, my mother-in-law added, squeezing my hand just a second too tightly. I remember the weight of my jewelry box as I placed it in the cupboard that night. Polished wood, brass lock, the faint smell of sandalwood oil clinging to the bangles. For a moment, I hesitated. A stupid instinct tugged at me, but I closed the door anyway. That was my first mistake. Back in the hospital, my husband stood by the window while his mother spoke. He didn't turn around. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him quietly. He exhaled, like I was exhausting. They needed money, he said. It was temporary. Temporary. You sold my things. He finally looked at me, then, irritation flickering across his face. Sold is a strong word. I felt something crack, not loudly, but completely. You knew, I said. He didn't deny it. They're old, he continued. They don't think the way you do. You can always buy new jewelry. New. As if meaning could be replaced with money. As if my mother's last gift could be reordered from a catalog. I turned my face away, staring at the pale curtain fluttering near the window. Outside, someone laughed. Somewhere else in the hospital, a baby cried. Life continued, indifferent and cruel. Inside me, something began to rearrange itself. That night, alone, I asked the nurse to lower the lights. Pain pulsed through my body in slow waves. Each breath felt borrowed. I traced the scar beneath the blanket with my fingertips, feeling the raised line that would never disappear. Like a reminder, I thought of my jewelry box, empty, hollow. Then my mind drifted and invited to something else. A folder, thin, gray, almost forgotten. I had found it years ago while organizing paperwork documents my husband dismissed as boring legal stuff. I remembered how my father-in-law laughed when I asked about it. Oh, that's nothing, he'd said. Just old property papers. Old. I remembered the address printed on the top page. The house we lived in. The one they claimed was fully theirs. At the time, I didn't question it. Now, lying in a hospital bed, with nothing but time and betrayal, the memory returned sharper. Why had my name been on one of those pages? The next morning, my mother-in-law brought fruit and forced cheer. You should be grateful, she said lightly. Many daughters-in-law don't get this kind of care. I smiled. It felt strange on my face, like wearing someone else's expression. You're right, I said softly. I am grateful. Her shoulders relaxed. That was when I knew. They thought I was broken. They thought surgery had cut away my spine along with the tissue. They were wrong. 2 weeks later, I returned home. The cupboard where my jewelry box once sat was spotless. Too spotless. as if erasing fingerprints could erase guilt. I opened it anyway. Empty. I rested my palm against the cool wood, and breathed through the ache in my body. Somewhere behind me, my husband cleared his throat. "We'll make it right," he said. I didn't answer. Instead, my eyes drifted to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room, the one no one ever touched. The one that still held that thin gray folder. I walked toward it slowly, each step careful, controlled, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. And I was about to remember everything they never thought I would. Pain teaches patience. Every step toward the filing cabinet sent a reminder through my abdomen, sharp warning, unforgiving. But I welcomed it. Pain meant I was still here. The cabinet drawer resisted at first, swollen with years of ignored paperwork. When it finally slid open, the sound was louder than it should have been. My husband looked up from his phone. "What are you doing?" he asked casually. "Looking for my medical bills," I said, not turning around, a lie. Inside the drawer, files leaned against each other, like tired witnesses. Electricity bills, old warranties, tax envelopes yellowed with age. And then there it was. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free. Funny how your body knows before your mind allows it. My heartbeat picked up. My throat tightened. Somewhere in my chest, a door I had locked years ago creaked open. I carried the folder to the bed and sat down slowly. The mattress dipped beneath my weight. I placed the folder on my lap like something sacred. The first page was exactly as I remembered. Property title. The address was unmistakable. The house, their house. My eyes moved line by line, absorbing details I had once ignored because I trusted the people around me. And there it was, my name printed neatly, legally, undeniably. I stared at it, convinced I was hallucinating. I closed my eyes, opened them again. A memory surfaced sharp, sudden. My father-in-law at the dining table years ago, sliding papers toward me with a pen. "Just a formality," he'd said. "For tax reasons." My husband, nodding, smiling. "Sign here, love. It doesn't mean anything." I had signed without reading, because I was new to the family, because I wanted peace. I flipped to the next page. Transfer documents. A partial ownership clause. Not symbolic, not ceremonial. They had used me, and now ironically, they had underestimated me. That night, while everyone slept, I took photos of every page. I emailed copies to myself, backed them up, sent them to a cloud account I had created years ago after my mother's death when I learned that lost doesn't warn you before it takes things away. As I worked, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't rage. This was clarity. The next piece came unexpectedly. 3 days later, my cousin-in-law visited. She hovered in the doorway, eyes darting nervously. "They didn't tell you?" she asked quietly. "Tell me what?" I replied, already bracing myself. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Your jewelry. They sold it to a local dealer. Cash, no receipts." I felt my jaw tighten. 2 days after your surgery. 2 days after my body was opened. 2 days after they smiled and prayed beside my hospital bed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I heard your mother-in-law say you wouldn't fight back. That you were weak." Weak. The word sat between us like an insult, begging to be corrected. "Do you know which dealer?" I asked. She nodded. "I can show you." The shop smelled like dust and old metal. Glass cases reflected my face back at me, thinner, but sharper around the eyes. The dealer didn't recognize me. Why would he? To him, my life had been melted down into weight and price. "These pieces," I said, sliding my phone across the counter. Photos of my jewelry, taken years ago on a careless afternoon. Bangles, necklace, ring. He studied them, then nodded. "Sold already." My chest tightened. To whom? He shrugged. "Private buyers." "Did the sellers mention where they got them?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He hesitated. "Family inheritance," he said finally. I laughed. It came out hollow. Family inheritance. As if theft sounds cleaner when dressed in tradition. That evening, I returned home with my body aching and my mind blazing. At dinner, my mother-in-law served food with extra sweetness. "Eat," she urged. "You need strength." I met her eyes and smiled. "Oh, I'm getting it back," I said softly. She froze. "Getting what back?" my husband asked. "Everything," I replied, lifting my glass. In time, the table went quiet. But no one asked questions. They didn't need to. Fear had begun to whisper. Later, alone in the bedroom, I held the only thing they hadn't touched. A small velvet pouch hidden in my suitcase. Inside it, my mother's ring. I had worn it the night before surgery, and forgotten to place it in the box. I slid it onto my finger now. The ruby caught the light. It didn't look fragile. It looked patient. That night, I made a list. Names, dates, evidence, allies. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning justice. And justice, I was learning, doesn't announce itself. It waits. Recovery gave me time. Not the gentle self-care kind people talk about online, but the forced stillness that sharpens your mind when your body can't move fast enough to distract it. Each morning, I woke before the house stirred, listening to the walls breathe. The same walls my in-laws believed they owned completely. The same walls that had watched me walk in as a bride and shrink myself to fit their expectations. I stopped shrinking instead. I observed, I noted patterns. When my father-in-law left for his morning walk. When my mother-in-law called her sisters. When my husband disappeared into silence. Power, I realized, lived in routines. And if you learned the rhythm, you could step in without being seen. My first ally wasn't a person. It was paperwork. I contacted a lawyer under the pretense of updating my will, another harmless lie. His office smelled like old books and antiseptic. When I slid the copies of the property documents across his desk, his eyebrows lifted slightly. Not in shock, but in interest. "This is unusual," he said carefully. "Is it illegal?" I asked. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "And if what you're implying is truth, that the property was misrepresented to you, then you have leverage." Leverage, the word tasted powerful. "What can I do?" I asked. He smiled thinly. The second ally came from an unexpected place. My husband. Not because he wanted to help, but because he was careless. One evening, while he showered, his phone buzzed on the bedside table. I didn't intend to look. I truly didn't. But the screen lit up with my mother-in-law's name, and a message preview. "She's recovering, but still stupid." I knew his passcode. I always had. Trust is a strange thing. It gives access long before it gives respect. Message after message unfolded. About using the cash to settle debts tied to the house. The house, there it was again. I took screenshots. Every lie leaves a trail. You just have to be willing to follow it. The third ally was silence. I stopped confronting. I cooked when asked. I smiled at the right moments. I nodded through conversations that once would have broken me. My mother-in-law mistook compliance for defeat. She grew careless. "They'll never suspect anything," she told my father-in-law one night. Unaware, I stood just beyond the kitchen doorway. "She's too emotional to plan." I pressed my palm to my abdomen, feeling the scar beneath my clothes. Emotional. If only she knew how much discipline it took to stay quiet when every instinct screamed to expose them. Weeks passed. My strength returned slowly, like a tide you don't notice rising until it's already changed the shore. I began leaving the house on my own again. "Doctor appointments," I said. In reality, I was visiting offices, banks, municipal records. I learned the value of signatures, of dates, of legal timing. The lawyer guided me carefully. "We don't rush," he said. "We wait until everything aligns." "What if they find out?" I asked. "They won't," he replied. "People who believe they've won stop watching the board." The turning point came with a single envelope. I had it delivered to the house in my name. Registered mail. Official. My mother-in-law's hands shook as she signed for it. "What is this?" she asked, forcing a laugh. "Probably hospital insurance," I said lightly. She didn't open it. Not yet. Fear prefers delay. Inside that envelope was a legal notice drafted, but not yet filed. A quiet warning. A glimpse of consequences. I watched her that evening. How she avoided my eyes. How she whispered to my husband behind closed doors. How my father-in-law's confidence faltered for the first time since I'd known him. Power shifts are subtle at first, then sudden. That night, my husband confronted me. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I looked at him. Really looked at the man who stood by while his parents stripped me of my memories and called it necessity. "I'm taking responsibility," I said. "For everything you didn't." He scoffed. "You think you're clever now?" I smiled. "I think I've always been," I replied. "You just never needed me to be." The final move required patience. The house was due for refinancing. A routine process, one my in-laws had postponed, assuming time was theirs. It wasn't. As a registered owner, my signature was required. Then I offered an alternative. Full transparency. Legal channels. Clean hands. My lawyer made the call. The silence that followed was deafening. They exploded. Accusations. Tears. Threats. "You can't do this," my mother-in-law screamed. "This is our home," my father-in-law shouted. I listened. Then I spoke. "It was also my jewelry," I said calmly. "And you sold that without asking." They stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Not as a daughter-in-law, but as an equal. as an obstacle, as a woman who had stopped begging. I went to my room afterward and removed my mother's ring. I placed it on the bedside table. For years, it had symbolized love. Now, it symbolized survival. The house sale was in motion, and they still believed they could stop it. The day the house went on the market, the air inside it changed. It's difficult to explain, unless you felt it yourself, how a place that once felt immovable suddenly becomes temporary. As if the walls themselves knew their time with certain people was ending. My mother-in-law walked through the rooms, touching furniture, muttering prayers under her breath. My father-in-law sat in silence, staring at the television, without seeing it. My husband avoided everyone, and me. I felt light, not happy, not victorious, just unburdened. The buyers came quickly. The house was in a desirable area, well maintained, full of memories they didn't know were poisoned. Each visit tightened the tension. Each offer pushed my in-laws closer to reality. "This isn't fair," my mother-in-law said one night, her voice trembling with something dangerously close to fear. "Family doesn't do this to family." I met her gaze steadily. "Family doesn't sell a woman's past while she's unconscious," I replied. She flinched. It was the first time she didn't argue. The sale finalized on a Tuesday morning. Clear skies, sharp sunlight, the kind of day that feels deliberately symbolic. At the lawyer's office, papers slid across the desk again. But this time, I read every word. I signed last. When the pen left the page, something inside me loosened. The house was gone. So was their illusion of control. They expected celebration. They didn't expect consequences. Their share of the money after debts, penalties, and legal adjustments was far less than they imagined. Enough to survive, not enough to dominate. Mine enough to start over that evening. I packed my things, not dramatically. No shouting, no slammed doors, just quiet certainty. My husband stood in the doorway, watching me fold clothes. "You planned this," he said finally. "Yes," I answered. "For how long?" I paused. "Since the hospital," he laughed bitterly. "So, that's it. You ruin my parents' life and walk away." I zipped my bag and looked at him. "They ruined mine while I was on an operating table," I said. "I just stopped protecting them from the consequences. I didn't take much with me. Clothes, documents, my laptop, and the velvet pouch. At my new apartment's mall, clean, filled with light, I unpacked slowly. I placed my mother's ring on the windowsill. For the first time, it didn't feel like a reminder of loss. It felt like a promise. Weeks passed, the noise faded, the accusations stopped. I heard, through distant relatives, that my in-laws were struggling, that my husband had moved back in with them, that they spoke of me like a storm they never saw coming. I didn't correct them. Storms don't explain themselves. One afternoon, I returned to the jewelry district, not to reclaim what was gone, but to create something new. I commissioned a piece, simple, strong, made from my own design. When I picked it up, the jeweler asked, "Is it for a special occasion?" I smiled. "Yes," I said, "my rebirth." That night, I stood in front of the mirror, scar visible, eyes steady, shoulders squared. I slipped the new piece around my neck. Then, carefully, I slid my mother's ring onto my finger again. It fit, not because it always had, but because I had changed to match it. Sometimes, people ask if I regret it, if revenge brought me peace. I tell them the truth. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. This was a woman refusing to stay silent when silence was mistaken for weakness. This was me choosing myself finally, fully, without apology. The worst moment of my life didn't break me. It revealed me. And that, I've learned, is the most dangerous thing a woman can become. Justice doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, like a door closing somewhere behind you, locking people inside their own choices. After I left, I expected noise, rage, accusations spilling into my phone, relatives calling to shame me back into obedience. That's how it usually goes when a woman refuses her assigned role. Instead, there was silence at first. I mistook it for peace. Then I realized it was shocked. The first crack appeared within weeks. A distant aunt called, her voice careful, almost embarrassed. "Beta, is it true you were a owner of the house?" I didn't answer immediately. I had learned the power of pauses. "Yes," I said calmly. She exhaled sharply. "They told everyone you tricked them, that you forged documents." I smiled to myself. "Ask them why the documents are registered," I said. "Ask them why the court accepted them." She didn't call back after that. Neither did anyone else from that side of the family. Truth spreads faster when it doesn't. Have to shout. The second crack was financial debts. Surfaced the kind my in-laws had hidden behind pride and religious phrases. Loans taken quietly. Promises made loudly. Without the house as leverage, creditors became impatient. My cousin-in-law messaged me one evening. "They're selling furniture," she wrote. "Your father-in-law went to the bank today. He came back pale." I read the message twice. Then I placed my phone face down and went back to my work. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I had learned something important during my recovery. Watching consequences unfold is not cruelty, it's restraint. The third crack was social. This one hurt them the most. In our culture, reputation is currency. You can survive poverty, but not whispers. At a wedding I did not attend, I heard my name was mentioned. Quietly, carefully. Always when my in-laws thought no one important was listening. "Did you hear what they did while she was in surgery? Jewelry. All of it. And then she sold the house legally." No shouting, no drama. The last question always came with disbelief. Because women are expected to scream. I didn't. That scared them more. My husband tried to call me after 2 months. I stared at the ringing screen, noticing how unfamiliar his name looked now, like it belonged to someone I had once known briefly, not someone who had shaped my life. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You've made your point," he said. "Everyone's talking. My parents are suffering. Isn't that enough?" Enough, as if justice came with a quota. As if pain should stop once it inconveniences the guilty. I deleted the message. What people never tell you about walking away is this: you don't feel brave every day. Some mornings, I woke up panicked, convinced I had ruined everything, that I had overreacted, that I should have forgiven, adjusted, endured. Those were the mornings I touched my scar. Not gently, deliberately. I reminded myself. They made decisions while I was unconscious. Anything that followed was simply a response. The in-laws tried one last tactic. My mother-in-law fainted dramatically at a family gathering. My father-in-law spoke of betrayal and dishonor. It almost worked until someone asked a question they hadn't prepared for. "Why did you sell her jewelry without permission?" Silence. No metaphor could cover that. No tradition could justify it. That was the moment their narrative collapsed. I ran into my father-in-law months later at a pharmacy. He looked smaller, older, as if the authority he once wore had been stripped away layer by layer. He saw me and froze for a second. I considered walking past him, then I stopped. He opened his mouth. Perhaps to lecture me, perhaps to beg. That was it. No anger, no accusation. I walked away behind me. I heard him exhale a sound heavy with things he would never say out loud. People often imagine empowerment as loud, but my empowerment was quiet, choosing furniture without permission, paying bills with money no one could control, sleeping without anxiety, tightening my chest. I grew into myself slowly, like muscles strengthening after injury. The woman who had trusted blindly was gone. In her place stood someone observant, grounded, unavailable for manipulation. One evening, as rain traced thin lines down my window, I took out the velvet pouch again. Inside was my mother's ring. I rolled it between my fingers, remembering how it once felt heavy with grief. Now, it felt balanced. I understood something then that I hadn't before. They didn't just steal my jewelry. They stole my assumption that love was safe. And by doing so, they forced me to learn discernment. That lesson, painful as it was, made me dangerous in the best way. I heard later that my in-laws moved into a smaller place. That relatives stopped asking them for advice. That my husband avoided conversations about me, because every version of the story ended with his silence in the hospital room. I didn't correct the record. The truth doesn't need defending when it stands on documentation, witnesses, and restraint. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine an alternate version of myself, the one who cried, the one who forgave too quickly, the one who stayed. She looks tired. She looks invisible. I whisper a thank you to the woman I became instead. This was not a story about revenge. It was a story about what happens when a woman stops negotiating her worth. They thought they could take pieces of my life while I was weak. They didn't realize they were training me to survive without them. And once you learn that, you don't go back.